Everyone, today we are moving into the second session of Module 3 Narration and Representation from your Methodology of Humanities. Now in this slide we are going to discuss about codes of perception. I'm sure you have heard this codes of perception in the previous session too. Now let's see what is this codes of perception. Our understanding of reality is based on codes of perception. Now codes of perception is actually a cognitive theory which describes how meaning is associated with the things we see and hear. We associate particular meaning to all those things we see and hear. Things here means signs as diverse as films, music, road signs, facial expressions and even voice modulations. So how is this possible? How are we able to understand these signs? How are we able to associate meaning to particular signs which we see and hear? So it is possible because of our experience and the shared representations. Now, shared representations means a common understanding of a particular thing. For example, if I go for a traffic signal like red, if you are using a vehicle and if it's a red light, it means that you are supposed to stop your vehicle. If it is a green, you are supposed to go. So this is the understanding which we all know, we all gained. It's a traffic rule. So we can say that it is a shared representation, or rather it is a universal kind of a representation regarding the color red. So like this, for each and everything we associate meaning in a particular way. We understand a particular meaning for each and everything. So to put it in other words, we understand these in the right way because we have a ready-made language and a system of representation. If I say the word cat, I am quite sure that you will be able to understand that I am going to talk about an animal which is of a particular size and a shape. So we can say that meaning and a word and meaning is actually at our disposal itself. So our understanding of each and everything is based on these codes of perception, and for these codes of perception we need language, and it is with the help of language that we are interpreting our realities. Codes of perception mean representations, language and signs that we accumulate over years, and this become the outline with which we interpret and read reality. So reality is represented when it gets, reality is interpreted when it gets represented. So already we discussed in the first session that one way of representing a reality is with the help of language, or we need language to represent our realities. So reality requires a language and a vocabulary to be delivered to our minds and senses. Now how is it representing identity? How representation bestows identity? So it is another thing. I have given example like women as weaker, children as innocent, etc. So you may have seen that almost always women are represented in literature, in films, music and everything as a weaker sex, children as innocent, the bird dove as a symbol of peace, etc. So it is that these things associate meaning and identity because it is represented in that way, or I can say that it is continuously or repeatedly presented in that particular way. So if you watch your films or movies, you can find out these things. So it is representation which is one of the reason for this identity. So representation is the one thing which bestows identity, and most of the people believe that this identity is true. So that is why in the bullet I have written like that: representation bestows identity, and this identity is taken as true. Now in this slide we are going to discuss about the narrative modes of thinking. So how does human mind think and imagine? This is a question which has fascinated philosophers and thinkers worldwide, and here we are going to find out possible answers for that question. Now, according to Jerome Bernard, who is a cultural psychologist, he proposes that there are two modes of thinking. One is logico-scientific method and the other one is a narrative mode of thinking. What is logico-scientific method? Logico-scientific method, there is a cause and effect sequence. So this thing will be clear from the given example. The king died and the queen died of sorrow as a result. Now in this given sentence, the reason for the death of the queen is already given. Like she died because of the sorrow which she felt after the death of the king. So the answer is given or established in the given sentence itself. Now when we go to the narrative mode of thinking, there is no logical cause-effect sequence. There is a sentence given: the king died and then the queen died. Now this sentence is actually open to the readers, that the reader can find out any number of possible answers or reasons behind the death of the queen. So that is the difference between a logico-scientific mode of thinking and a narrative mode of thinking. Now we are going to the details of a narrative mode of thinking. Narrative thinking does not seek to establish truth, instead, it seeks possibilities and similarities. Now, here we shall go back to the same example. The king died and the queen died. So, in that particular sentence, as we have already explained, that a person or the reader can find out any number of possible answers, possible reasons for the death of that particular queen. So, it is true, at the same time it cannot be called as a universal truth, because the answers or the reasons which I find out or the reader find out may be based on his or her own experience or his or her own codes of perception. So it is true, at the same time it cannot be considered as a universal kind of a truth. Now the second point, it does not work only with reason and rationality but works with association. So already it's based on imagination, so naturally it need not always be based on reason and rationality. So it works also with imaginations. The third point, it deals with particular conditions and experience and not universal truth. Already we explained this particular point in the first sentence itself. Now when we are moved to the fourth point, whereas the logico-scientific pattern does not tolerate contradiction, the narrative mode accepts contradiction. Now here again we are going to the same example. In logico-scientific pattern, the sentence like the king died and the queen died because of the sorrow, the answer or the reason behind the death of the queen is given, and so it cannot tolerate any kind of contradiction because the answer is already established. Now in the other way, in the narrative mode of thinking, the king died and the queen died, there we can find out any number of reasons. I can find out a particular reason for the death of the queen and another person can find out another reason. So the contradictions are possible. Now the fifth point, narrative thinking is rooted in a context because it understands that meaning emerges within specific context of communication and representations. So you all know that meaning is basically based on a context. So likewise narrative thinking is also based on context, or it is highly contextual. In this slide we are going to sum up the narrative points which is associated with the narrative mode of thinking. So it is not related to universal truth, it is context specific meaning, and it imposes a pattern. So we discussed about narratives, and the two we talked about what is the importance of a pattern or events in a narrative mode. So here too it imposes a pattern on the past, seek a logic through which the random events could be linked. It attains a sense of self that is complete rather than fragmented, ordered rather than random. So here we can say that it is the person or the reader who is associating a particular meaning, who is trying to find out a particular meaning for what he has read. So it need not be fragmented, it will be rather more complete. And it is a reader who is to fill in gaps and discover connections, and it is a reader's duty to imagine and find out any number of answers he wants. Now we are going to find out how a narration works in literature, philosophy and history. So literary text presents imaginary events. So this is actually a sentence which is taken from your text. But we can also say that literature is not just a representation of imaginary events, but it even makes use of history and also science. So it's a combination of all these things, right? So history represents things that have actually happened in the past. History is actually the recorded thing, what happened, how those things happen in the past, and it's a recorded thing, right? And the philosophical texts are mediations on abstract and concrete things. Philosophy or philosophical texts try to find out an answer or it try to explain the fundamental nature of reality, knowledge and even existence. Now here we are going to focus on how narration works in literature. So already when we discussed narration in the first part, we have talked about all these things. So I believe that these points are familiar to you. It consists of a plot, the story and the sequence of events unfolding in action. Narration is technically called diegesis, telling of the story. Narrative theory focuses on three elements, that is author, text and the reader. So here we are going to focus on the first element, that is the author. Here you have to remember the slide where we discussed about Seymour Chapman's diagram, where he represented three pairs: implied author, implied reader, narrator, narratee, and real author and the real reader. So here again it's the same thing. Author, the real author who has actually written that particular text. The reader's constructed image of the author can be called as the implied author. Implied author is actually a term used by Wayne C. Booth in his The Rhetoric of Fiction. And the third pair, here we are going to focus on narrator. Narrator is the one who tells the story, who is actually the voice which works in the fiction. Now we are going to focus on narrator. That is a voice which works in a fiction. There are different kinds of narrator. Actually, there are four different kinds of narrator. One is heterodiegetic narrator. The narrator is outside the story and tells the story. This kind of narrative is commonly called known as a third person or omniscient narrative. Here, the events happen below the narrator. He or she is like a god who knows everything. So, the heterodiegetic narrator can be called as a person, as a god who knows each and everything, as a person who knows what is going to happen in this character, who knows the past, present, and even the future of the characters presented in that particular work. So this kind of a narrator can be called as heterodiegetic narrator. Now the second type of narrator is heterodiegetic and interdiegetic narrator. So in this mode of narration, the narrator stands inside the story. It's almost similar to the heterodiegetic narrator, but the one and only difference between heterodiegetic and the second type of narration is that the narrator, that is a heterodiegetic and interdiegetic narrator, will be inside the story itself. He is like a spectator who is viewing, who is watching all these things. He may be familiar to those characters presented in the particular work, but he is seeing all these things, he is watching all these things, and he is talking to the narratee, or he is talking to the readers. So that kind of a narrator can be called as a heterodiegetic and interdiegetic narrator. Now the third kind of narrator is a homodiegetic narrator. So the story is narrated by a person who is also a character in the story. He or she is narrating that particular work. So homodiegetic narrators are usually called as first person narrator because it is the person or a character in the story who is speaking about his life or her life, or who is narrating a particular thing to the narratee. So that kind of a narrator is called as a homodiegetic narrator. Now the last type of narrator is autodiegetic narrator. Now autodiegetic narrator, the very term auto gives the clue like what kind of a narrator it is. Autodiegetic narrators can be usually seen in autobiographical kind of writings, that he or she is actually narrating his or her own story. So that kind of a narrator can be called as an autodiegetic narrator. So by this we are concluding this part, this session. We'll continue in the next session. Thank you all.